let's get going, and then people will come in as I speak. Okay, so we have done 5 lectures. We've got 5 lectures to go, and then 2 weeks of presentations and an open book quiz. Now, for your quiz, you can use your laptops, your tablets, your phones. Okay, it is open book, not just written textbook. Okay. Now, we've had some quite sort of heavy going lectures with regard to content of curriculums, which are really quite geared towards if you are going into that area and sort of educational psychology. But do give you a brilliant idea on the characteristics of these children, these wonderful children, and how we can diagnose them. Today we're going to mix it up a bit, and we're going to have a little bit more fun. So hopefully you get something out of it and enjoy it at the same time. We're going to talk about creativity, and creativity comes up a lot, doesn't it, when we're talking about gifted and talented children. So it's a big and important part of who these children are and what they can give us in the future. And one aspect of creativity is thinking. Different aspects of thinking, how we think, why we think, and the various different methods of thinking. So we're going to go into a lot of that today. Okay, so the continents, this world we live in, the earth, the universe that surrounds us is filled with a wonderful beauty, a wonderful mystery that keeps us stimulated and keeps us challenged, regardless of level of IQ or creative abilities. But it's the human mind, the mind that has learned to survive anything that nature's thrown at us so far. It's the human mind that has come up with ways in which we can defeat diseases. And to this point in time, we have survived wars. And it's the way in which we think about this, okay? And it's through the centuries, over history. It's those we've called geniuses, those individuals who have superior levels of intelligence that have provided the answers to all sorts of different world problems, all sorts of different riddles that we have had to overcome. And it's gifted children that often exhibit, as we've seen when we've looked at characteristics of gifted individuals, those characteristics of identifying them, the models, have all got this element of creative talent in there as well. Now, gifted children learn more quickly in an environment that nurtures their creative tendencies. So do other children. I mean, we can see that in research. Children have higher IQs when they are surrounded by an enriched environment. Those that are deprived of all sorts of stimulation have lower IQs. So think what children can do who have this ability, that have this giftedness, have this higher IQ or this different ability. If we can really enrich them and nurture their creative tendencies to allow them to think differently and to think outside the box. So we need to enrich all children, but think what the difference can be when we enrich lives of those who are gifted and talented. Now, when we think of creativity, most of you will probably think of music, art, drawing, but it is so much more than that. There are so many different areas of mathematics, of literature, of poetry, of innovation that is creative, but isn't necessarily about piano lessons and art lessons. So we're going beyond what we think of as a creative ability, but making it far more broad. So more or less, we all possess the same information. But it's what we do with that information that is important. Creativity and innovation is how we deal with that information in new ways and in different ways. And it is those that have this genius tendency, those that are gifted and talented, they link things together in ways that other people don't. So many amazing inventions are to do with curiosity. And these happen by accident, but it's those individuals that question the why. Why did that happen? How did that happen? And link things together that really advance our society. So X-rays, microwaves, smoke detectors, drugs, post-it notes, safety glass, all sorts of different things are just by accident. If Fleming hadn't looked at his Petri dish and asked, why? Why is bacteria grown in that area and not that area? If he'd thrown that Petri dish away, we wouldn't have penicillin, or he wouldn't have come up with penicillin. The same with the microwave. It was done by accident. A guy was working in the Second World War, and he was working on microwave, something to do with, I presume, bombs and what have you. And he noticed that every time he was doing particular experiments, the candy bar in his pocket melted. And instead of just going, oh, that's real inconvenience, I wanted my candy bar, he asked the question, why? Why is that melting? So it's these individuals who have these gifts and these talents, this curiosity to link ideas together that are the idea of this creative process. We all have the same information, but it's what we do with it. And those that are gifted and talented are far better at putting things together than others. Now we're just going to watch the first couple of minutes of this video, and if we've got time at the end, we're going to watch the rest of it as well. The world needs believers and the world needs doers. And the world needs dreamers who do.
And what do you think makes a gifted student a gifted student?
I think, okay. A gifted, well, see it.
That's probably the hardest question you'll ask me, is how to define giftedness.
Well, it doesn't mean smart. It does. It's not smart. It means you. Everyone is creative. Everyone is creative. Everyone is smart in a different way. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to leave it there.
Bottom line is that
everyone is creative. And as you know, it's very difficult to define, and everyone has a different definition. But essentially, they are all creative. They link ideas together that other people don't. They see things that other people don't. So what is the car parking spot's number? 87. Yeah? Everybody get that? Turn your head upside down. Okay, so 86, 87, 88, 89, 90, 91. Looking at things from a different perspective. Okay? Right, circle time. I want you, in 3 minutes, and I'll time it, to fill in as many circles as you can. Okay, there you go. Pencils down. Okay, now that is a test of creativity that is well used within the psychology domain to establish those who are gifted and talented within the creative domain. Okay, so your brief was very simple. It was just to fill in as many circles as you can. And looking around here, there is a real diverse array of creative abilities and creative thinking. Now, hopefully, those of you who hadn't looked, how many did you get? How many in total have you filled in? Okay, we'll come back to that in a minute. Okay, how many of you followed a theme? Okay, many people don't do this. They meet each circle different, but there's a couple of themes I've seen here. Lots of different faces, okay? Making each circle doesn't always have to be different, okay? Some people assume creativity equals originality. In some definitions it does, but for some people it doesn't, okay? So did you follow a theme? Oh. Did you group them? Yeah? Did you group them? Many people don't do this as well. They want to keep inside the circle. They feel like they're constricted. Did you think outside the box? Think differently. See it not as circles, not as being constricted, but actually see a bigger picture. And we'll come back to what divergent thinking is in a minute. Did any of you use colour? A lot of people today don't even have colour pencils, okay? So thinking differently, seeing things in a different way, okay? So this is a really interesting test on who can think differently and see things differently. Now, if I gave it to you again, having known this, you'd do something different again, wouldn't you? You've learned something from this. You have effectively learnt divergent thinking, and you've learnt to be creative and starting to see things in a different way and to think differently. Even just with one test. Okay, and I think we all know by now, we're not just talking about high IQ. The definition highlights the area of talent as well as creativity. Those who are gifted and talented are able to see things in a different way. So we've talked about creativity being just art and literature. Well, it's so much more than that. It is about maths, it is about science, it is about poetry, all sorts of different areas. And maybe in today's world, the success and even the survival of companies depends on individuals seeing things and doing things in a different way. Because the shelf life of a lot of products isn't what it used to be. We are now connecting things and doing things in so much faster periods of time than we ever used to, okay? So it's about staying ahead of the competition, yeah? Thinking about something, the next step ahead. It's not about what's going on here and now. Now this is quite an interesting video. It's quite fun, YouTube clip, but there's more to it than that. This is the top innovations, okay, the top innovations from people who have thought and seen things in a different way.
These ideas changed the world. Welcome to WatchMojo.com, and today we're counting down our picks for the top 10 inventions of all time. Number 10, paper. One of the Chinese people's 4 great inventions, paper was invented and developed in the 2nd century BC by the Han Dynasty. The idea eventually traveled to Europe, where paper mills began manufacturing the product on a larger scale. Without paper, the printing press would never have been invented, and our world would be very different. We would not have maps, paper currency, or books to disperse information. Its impact is truly endless. Number 9, the compass. Before the compass, sailors depended on landmarks or even the stars to navigate their ships. But once the Chinese began using lodestones and magnetism to find their bearings between the 9th and 11th centuries, it quickly spread to the Arab world and to Europe. This not only made circumnavigation of the globe easier, it also made it safer, which kicked off the age of discovery. Number 8, refrigeration. Though ice was used since prehistoric times to prevent food from spoiling and developing bacteria, the concept of refrigeration was only developed in earnest starting in the mid-1700s. The process was then refined and improved, changing the way the food industry transports and stores food. The implications of this discovery are far-reaching, as it transformed the way we eat and live. Number 7. The printing press. Though Johannes Gutenberg is credited with this invention, he actually perfected and popularized existing technology. By combining the Chinese principle of movable type with European press systems already in use for winemaking, Gutenberg created the machine that printed text on a wide scale, which in turn lowered the price of books and helped spread information and knowledge to the masses, spurring the Reformation, the Renaissance, and the scientific revolution. Number 6. Plumbing. The landscape of major cities would be drastically different without this innovation. After all, how would a high-rise exist without modern plumbing? Evolving from holes in the ground to chamber pots to outhouses and eventually to flush toilets as early as the 31st to 26th centuries BC, the development of plumbing improved living conditions for millions of people across the globe and lengthened our lifespans. Number 5. Medicine. Many medicines and vaccinations have extended and changed our lives significantly. Discovered by accident by Alexander Fleming, penicillin was the first group of drugs that fought illnesses like syphilis and strep infections. On the other side of the spectrum, since they were introduced to the public in the 1960s, contraceptives such as the birth control pill helped level out the global population and launched a revolution in social change. Number 4. Engines. These engines got industry and the population moving. Instead of relying on horses as transportation, people traveled across the countryside via Thomas Newcomen's steam engine as of 1712, which was improved upon by James Watt later that century, quickly becoming the backbone of society and sparking the Industrial Revolution. Internal combustion ultimately replaced steam and ushered in the Second Industrial Revolution, and allowed individuals to affordably travel great distances. Number 3. The wheel. Though it's still unclear which civilization was first to invent this simple machine in the 4th century BC, it's obvious that it's been one of the world's most vital innovations. The transportation, commerce, and travel industries wouldn't be the same without it, and today the wheel can be found in every aspect of our daily lives, from water wheels, gears, motors, and engines, to more fun applications. Number 2. Communications. Several inventions changed global communications forever. Samuel Morse brought us the electric telegraph in 1836. Alexander Graham Bell's telephone was the first to be awarded a patent to transmit voices in 1876. Guglielmo Marconi and Nikola Tesla developed radio in the late 19th century. Moving pictures first came across John Logie Baird's television in 1925. Conrad Zuse developed the first computer in the early 40s, and Tim Berners-Lee proposed the World Wide Web in the late 80s, and they all made the world a little bit smaller. Before we unveil our number 1 pick, here are a few honorable mentions. Number 1. Electricity. Not only did sleep patterns change drastically with the introduction of electricity, so did work habits. From Ben Franklin to Nikola Tesla to Michael Faraday to Thomas Edison, many innovators made important contributions to this modernization, which brought light and power to the masses. However, electricity only became a necessity and standard to everyday life in the mid-20th century. Before that, it was enjoyed mainly in the big cities. Do you agree with our list? Which inventions could you not live without? For more informative
Okay, so although that is quite light-hearted and quite fun, it gives you a really good idea how these individuals have thought differently, seen things differently, put things together to really improve our world situation and to really progress society as it is. And what is going to happen in the next 10, 20, 30 years? I mean, we all love Netflix. We all love Steve Jobs for everything that he's done for combining our phone with our music, with our email. I mean, when I was your age and I was doing my PhD, we didn't have all of that. You know, I only got email when I was a first-year undergrad. How the world has changed in my lifetime. I don't know why that's doing that. is incredible. So how is the world going to change in your lifetime? What are you guys going to see? And it's because of the great thinkers, those who are gifted and talented, that are going to make such a difference to your difference to your lives. So, definitions. What is creativity? Now, creativity seems to be one of those things that we all understand, but really find it difficult to pinpoint and explain exactly what it is. Now, if we go back years and years, it's referred to as art and genius. Yeah, even back then, individuals were called genius, those who had that gift and that talent to see things in a different way. Moving forward, we can see that creativity is the result, that novel idea, that end result of that process. And Stein says that it has to be useful as well. You can't just have creativity for creativity's sake. Now, I can't pronounce his name, Isaacson, in 1987, so relatively recently, was saying that we recognise creativity on our own field because we know and appreciate it. But not everybody will judge creative abilities, creative process, the novelty, the end result, the same. Okay, so everybody has a different view and a different consideration of what they understand as creative. And then Steinberg at the bottom and Lubart argue that creative people are recognised by the products that they produce. So again, thinking about this novelty and this usefulness. So there are many different definitions of what creativity is. There's not just one gold standard. Okay, and I could have chosen a lot of different creative areas. We could have talked about poetry, we could have talked about science, we could have talked about athletics. But I thought actually maths research is something we don't think about when we talk about creativity. And it is these children that are gifted, that are talented, that are able to look at things in different ways. They link concepts, they link mathematical problems together that other children don't see. Creative students find what the problem really is and what a better solution might be. Just because there is an answer to the question doesn't mean to say you can't answer it in a different way. And that is what gifted and talented students do. They find different ways to answer questions that have already been answered. They can recognise and apply and go beyond just the conditions that they're set. How many of you went outside your circle? Okay, gifted and talented children don't confine themselves to the rules and the regulations. They see things and go beyond what is that construct. And within the idea of space and imagination, they don't just go and see things in 1 and 2D. They see things in a different way, in this 3D rotational of images. So a whole different way of connecting and combining ideas that typically developing children wouldn't necessarily see. Okay, the next little thing I want you to do, turn your piece of paper over, and without looking at the next slide, no cheating, see if you can draw this. I don't actually have a hard copy to be photocopied. So there is segments A, B, C and D. And what you need to do is split section A, the white bit, ignore the grey bit in the middle, but split section A in half, 2 equal halves. Split section B into 3 separate halves, all the same size, but 3 separate sections, okay? So you're splitting section A into 2 separate sections of the same size. B into 3 sections of the same size. C will go into 5 different sections. And see if you can find D and split it into 7 different sections, all of the same size. Do you all understand that? So A is split in half in 2 separate sections, ignoring the grey boxes. B you need to split into 3 separate sections of the same size. C needs to be split into 5 different sections, and D you need to split into 7 different sections. Sorry, C is 4 sections, that's my mistake, 4 sections. So 2, 3, 4, 7. And see how you think about it. It's not necessarily complicated. Brilliant, well done. A goes in half, so you get 2. B goes into 3. So by the time you get to D, you're really quite apprehensive and worried and constrained about this is going to be really difficult because I couldn't do C. Okay, but sometimes it's a lot easier than you think it is. Okay, so don't let the complexity get to you. Sometimes it's a lot easier than it looks. Okay, and we're going to come back to thinking outside the box in a minute. Okay, we're going to go back to thinking and people. So it's those individuals that see the world in a different way, combine ideas, and these thinkers come from all sorts of different backgrounds. Some are scientists, some are philosophers, some are politics, and others are to do with human rights that have really pushed forward society. They've enriched our lives with art, music, literature, provided technology and medical advances to keep us safe. Now, you can't actually read that. But where would we be without those people who believed in Christ, Muhammad, Confucius, to push forward their beliefs and their ideas? What about Buddha and Darwin, Socrates, Michelangelo, Bach, Einstein, Newton, St. Teresa, or Gandhi? Okay, all these individuals have had that gift and that talent that have really made an amazing contribution to the world. Now, I'm going to try and start this video halfway through because it's a bit long to watch. So if we start at, these are the top 10 thinkers that have really made a difference to society. Start at. I don't know if I can. Okay, let's try here.
This paradox, Rousseau outlines an idealized political structure, citing the duties of citizens to the state, and in turn, the state's obligation to protect the citizens' inherent right to freedom. Number 6,
No,
Socrates.
We're psychologists, so we
The
like them.
unexamined life is not worth living. Socrates' philosophy focused on justice and virtue. This study took form through a dialectic strategy of contemplating certain questions to reveal universal truths, a process now known as the Socratic method.
Asking questions where there were questions to be asked, not remaining content with assumptions or with authority. This is very Socratic.
But perhaps his most enduring statement was, "I know that I know nothing." Highly critical of the ruling elite in Athens, Socrates was sentenced to death for impiety and corrupting the youth, becoming a martyr to the love of knowledge and the legendary father of Western philosophy. Number 5, Confucius. Also known as Kung Fu, Confucius searched for remedies to the social and political chaos of his time. He believed in the restoration and maintenance of traditional Chinese values to re-establish an ethical society. This philosophy was built on the principles of loving others, self-discipline, and self-restraint, and an early precursor of the Golden Rule. Though he never saw the fulfillment of these ideals within his lifetime, Confucianism continues to have a meaningful impact on cultural practices in many parts of East Asia. Number 4, René Descartes. Deemed founder of the modern age, Descartes saw the whole philosophy as an intricate web, anchored in metaphysics and physics with practical applications in other sciences and ethics. Integral to Descartes' ideas was Cartesian dualism. I think, therefore I am, he explained, noting that one's existence is housed in the mind, completely separate from the body. A champion of rationalism and empirical study, Descartes provided the foundations of modern scientific methodology and thought. Number 3, Friedrich Nietzsche. German philosopher and cultural critic, Nietzsche highlighted the death of God, predicting an end to traditional modes of philosophy and religion, and the ushering in of an era of nihilism. Though Nietzsche rejected the notion of universal constraints or truth, it is hotly debated as to whether or not Nietzsche was nihilistic or working towards overcoming nihilism. A prolific thinker whose life was cut short by illness, his ideas continue to ignite controversy and inspire debate. Number 2, Plato. Believing the truth was best pursued through rational inquiry, Plato conceptualized two realms, one of idealized versions of all things, which he called forms, and our physical world where imperfect versions of these forms exist, as illustrated by his allegory of the cave. Plato's Republic best outlines these ideas, applying them to the conceptualization of an ideal society. Though his work veers toward the abstract, Plato's writing is an essential contribution to the annals of Western philosophy, inspiring thinkers for the past 2.5 millennia. Before we unveil our number 1 pick, here are a few honorable mentions. Number 1, Aristotle. Famed tutor of Alexander the Great, Aristotle's works cover everything from physics to theater. A student of Plato's Academy, Aristotle diverged from his predecessor's rationalist pursuits by embarking on empirical study of the natural world. This focus led him to conclude that no metaphysical notion of form exists without evidence of real substance. A quintessential characteristic of Aristotelian thought, this idea would have far-reaching influence on the development of Western philosophy, theology, and science, as did his principles of causality and the golden mean. Do you agree with our list? What great thinker gets your head spinning?
And where do we think it's going to go? Okay, who are the next great thinkers of society? How many children sitting in schools today are going to be the great thinkers and come up with the next wonderful philosophies? And you guys might be around to see it, to coach it, to be inside the school. Right, we're going to move on to thinking, as that put us in the mood. Different aspects of thinking. Now, we all know how to think, and almost every educator would agree that. But the need for creative thinking, the need for innovation, the need for entrepreneurial thinking has been increasingly recognised as engineers to foster this culture, this real drive forward to create a much more developed socio and economic society, making creative thinking an increasingly important area within our education and within our future. So human beings think in many different ways, but we actually very, very rarely reflect on how you think. So what is thinking? Well, if I said to you a pink unicorn, how many of you are now thinking of a pink unicorn? Okay, it's everything that our conscious mind does. Yeah? And there's an awful lot that goes on that we don't actually consciously take care of in understanding. But thinking is about what is in that conscious mind at that time. It's our mental arithmetic. It's remembering that phone number. Now, when you started learning to touch type, when you started to learn to drive, you were consciously thinking about every movement, everything that you were doing. But actually, as time passes on, these things become habits, don't they? You don't think about driving, changing gear, looking in the mirror as much as you needed to. You don't think about the placement of your fingers on the keyboard, okay? So thinking is about what is in our conscious processes rather than those subconscious habits. Styles of thinking. Now, most people think about things only in one particular way, and looking at your circles, you are beginning to see how you think. Yet, there are different styles of thinking, and we're going to talk about this in a moment. Different situations lean towards different ways in which we think. So, it can really help us achieve our goals and influence others, and let us avoid making errors if we understand how we as individuals think and how other individuals think as well. So we're going to take a break now, and then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about divergent thinking versus convergent thinking. Okay, let's get going with divergent and convergent thinking. Okay? So when you guys have a challenging problem, what thinking strategy do you use? Are you somebody who relies on their knowledge that they already have to solve a problem? Are you somebody that starts with the simplest solution and then works through? Did you go A, B, C, D on your cube, or did you actually look at all your options and fill them in with how you found it most easy to fill in? Okay, so what type of thinking situations do you find yourself in, and how do you use different strategies within them? In most situations, a solution can be used using any of these strategies, but they're not all created equally. If you always think in the same way, you will always get the same results. So if you continue to think in the way you always thought, you'll always continue to get what you always got. You need to think differently, see things differently, and that term, think outside the box. So creative thinking really is a way of looking at problems or situations from a very different perspective, from a different way of seeing things, being able to see things inside out, turning things upside down. And it really will then look at identifying unique and unorthodox solutions. So if you look at this one in particular, I did this with my undergrads the other day. What does that, oh, what do you see? Yeah. Can you see that? Yeah, see things differently. And you've all seen this before. Yeah? The old lady and the young lady. And sometimes you get fixated. Now all I can see there now is the old lady. I find it very difficult to look at the younger lady. So the young lady's here, eyelashes, nose and chin, hair and ear. And the old lady here is the chin, the mouth and the hair. Yeah? Can you see the old lady and the young lady? But sometimes we get very stuck in the way that we look at things, very stuck in looking at things in one different perspective. Oh, stop it. So we're going to talk about divergent and convergent thinking. Now, these were concepts that were developed by Guilford in around the 1950s. A very famous psychologist when it comes to thinking about creativity and different types of thinking. Now, the two different areas of thinking are divergent thinking and convergent thinking. Now, divergent thinking is where you have one question, but you have lots of different ways in which you can answer that question. One stimulus, many responses, divergent thinking. Whereas convergent thinking is you have one question and there is one correct answer. So if we look at convergent thinking then, it's the type of thinking that you do when you're solving a particular problem, a straightforward question and answer. There is one direct solution to the convergent thinker. So if I said to you, what was the capital of England? And you said the answer was London, you'd know that that was convergent thinking. Okay, one question, one answer. So when you're in school and you're taking the test, those multiple choice tests, and you're supplying definitions, terms, remembering a name or a particular theory, they are all types of convergent thinking. Divergent thinking is very different. It is spontaneous, it is free-flowing, it is original thinking, coming up with those unique ideas. It's the what-ifs and the how-abouts. It's filling in those circles, okay, going beyond the convergent thinking. And there are different aspects of divergent thinking. Think about your circles and the elaboration, that embellishment, building on ideas, putting things together. Steve Jobs did this brilliantly when he invented the iPhone, with putting in music and email and adding things together that hadn't been put together before. So embellishing, building upon different ideas. This is a key ingredient to divergent thinking. Curiosity as well. Individuals who are gifted and talented have this amazing curiosity. They ask those questions. Characteristics of individuals who are gifted and talented. They ask those searching questions. They look deeper into ideas because they want to know about something. So that really is one of the highlights of that characteristic of gifted and talented children. Originality. How many of you came up with some wonderful new ideas in your circles? Okay, totally new, totally different. Imagination, being able to dream up new ideas, invent new things, new products, be ingenious. Okay, so imagination is a key ingredient to divergent thinking. Fluency as well. The ability to generate lots of different circles. How many circles did you get? Okay, how fluent is your thinking? Are you good at generating lots of different ideas? Are you good at brainstorming? And risk-taking. If you're not able to take risks, you're never going to be creative because you're never going to combine those ideas. Okay, you've got to lose that fear of being wrong if you're going to be creative. And also flexibility. How many different categories did you get to? What was the variety of ideas that you came up with? Did you come up with faces and just stick with that? Or did you come up with lots of different types of things? Foods. Okay, so lots of different categories. So here we go, have a look at your sheet. Did you have lots of fluency? Did you get lots of different responses along a theme? Were you flexible in your thinking? Okay. How original were your ideas? Were they unusual? Were they different? And did you elaborate on them? Did you give them lots of different detail? Now, in a test, you would get marks for how fluent you were, how flexible you were, how original you were, and how you elaborated. And the higher you are, the better you are at creative thinking. Okay, and this is one of the aspects of being gifted and talented. So fluency, flexibility, originality, and elaboration. Okay, remember that. Fluency, flexibility, originality, and elaboration. Very important. So what types of convergent or divergent thinking? So your name, convergent thinking. Okay. What else could you be doing? Oh, lots of different things that you could actually be doing. So that's divergent thinking, okay? What are you doing now? There's one answer, so that's convergent thinking. Okay, you get the idea. So if it's a particular question, one answer, one question, convergent thinking. What you could put in your container would be divergent thinking. Okay, so you get the idea. Now, example of how you frame questions depends on how you can get individuals to think. So the question would be, I live 4 miles from work. My car gets 30 miles per gallon. You can tell I'm English. I want to use fuel in my commute for financial you know the word, I can't even say it. Conservation reasons. Money is no object. Now, the way in which you frame a question depends on the answer you're going to get. And you'll know that in life. And as a psychologist, it's very important in the way in which you frame questions. So the convergent question would be, find 3 best replacement vehicles for my car. Whereas the divergent question would be, what options do I have? How can I reduce my fuel consumption? So 2 very different ways of posing the same question. Okay, convergent question relies on 3 particular vehicles, where the divergent example doesn't rule out options like moving closer to work. Can you walk? Can you carpool? Okay, taking public transport. So the way in which you phrase your question, convergently or divergently, depends on the answer you're going to get. So we actually need both convergent and divergent thinking in order to be creative. It's a constant shifting and blending of these 2 thinkings that allow us to combine these ideas. So we need to be flexible in our thinking to develop the capacity to think in different ways and to think effectively. Okay, so convergent thinking, stuff you already know. Divergent thinking is all about how we can stimulate that thinking, and the ways in which we can do this are by brainstorming. Okay, brainstorming is a great way of being able to come up with and generate lots of different ideas. Now, brainstorming is brilliant because you should get all the ideas, okay? You should never say when you're generating ideas that something is wrong, okay? You should just write down all the crazy and wacky ideas you can get, okay? You can keep a journal. Lots of people, gifted and talented, need to write things down. They wake up in the night and they have an idea. So keeping a journal. It's not a diary. It's not, this is what I did today. A journal is very different. It's a bit like scrapbooking. You can get everything, all your ideas, your different web pages that you've come across, okay? And that's a really good way of being able to think divergently, think differently. Mind mapping, you've all done this before, I'm sure, in that you can visualise the way in which you can think differently and see things in a different way. Just a visual representation. And free writing as well. I'm not going to get you to do this today. I've done it before with individuals. But it can really help you generate different ideas. Okay? You have to write whatever comes into your mind for 5-10 minutes. Okay? Without proofreading, without really thinking about it. But you get down a lot of different ideas. It's a great way of just spontaneously sort of piggybacking ideas. So there are many different ways in which we use and can stimulate our divergent thinking. But Mark Runco says that there are 2 ends of this continuum, okay? We need to solve a problem using this divergent and convergent thinking. Because when we brainstorm, we can come up with a lot of ideas. Now, if you then start using your convergent thinking and start crossing ideas off, you might not be able to combine those ideas. That idea might not spark somebody else's idea. So it's fatal to really use our convergent thinking too early in that divergent thinking process, okay? Right, let's talk about testing creativity. So there's some wonderful tests that have been developed over the years, particularly by Guilford, who define these 3 different divergent thinking areas: fluency, flexibility, originality. And it was really his idea that established that creativity and the difference in IQ. It wasn't just about being high in IQ anymore. It really turned on its head the way in which we think about individuals being creative and being gifted and talented as well. Now, he did a massive research project in the 1950s that, within the University of South Carolina. And he identified a number of these aptitude research thinking tests that are used for understanding gifted and talented children and to be able to sort of place them in the right education establishment for their particular gifts and talents. They are divided into verbal tests and figural tests, so drawing tests. So, here we go. In groups, I don't mind if you do it in groups or if you want to do it individually. Verbal tests, okay? This was developed in the late 1960s and is used quite a lot within generating divergent thinking. So as groups, I want you to take 5 minutes and think of as many different uses as you can for one of those. It doesn't matter, a brick, a shoe, or a paperclip. Now remember, brainstorming ideas, you can come up with as many ludicrous, crazy, wonderful ideas as you can. You can choose whether you want to come up with the uses for a brick, a shoe, or a paperclip. It's up to you. You can do it in groups or you can do it on your own. But we are stimulating your divergent thinking skills.
Entertainment, construction, and music. Daily life, like if you're not tall enough, it can help you to like get tall. And also the mentalities and weapons to kill or to entertain someone.
Okay, so the more creative you are, the more your divergent thinking works. You'll say, okay, this is a brick, but can I make it this big? Can I make it that big? Can I make it out of a different material? Can I grind the brick down and make it into dust? And what can I do with it? Okay. So divergent thinking really is seeing things in a totally different way and never saying you can't do something with something. So here are a few examples. They might not be very clear. But using it as a hat, a brick, using it as a bikini, okay, a bag. So just because it started off that size doesn't mean to say you can't make it out of different material. Make it lighter, make it heavier, okay? Headphones. So some of your ideas were brilliant, okay, and really thinking about different ways in which you can use things. And then paper clips, okay, using them as earrings, as jewellery. And then putting them to a totally different use, okay? So thinking differently, thinking outside the box, coming up with unusual ideas. Okay, lateral thinking. Again, talking about sort of verbal skills. Anybody name something that is round or circular in shape? A ball. Okay, that would be quite an obvious one. Could somebody think of something that is not so obvious, that is round in shape? Your face! Absolutely. Okay? An onion. Okay, so it doesn't have to be specific, it can be quite lateral in the way that you think about it. Okay, something that is white and edible. Gum. Snow. Yeah, lateral thinking, okay? You're not just thinking along the same normal pathways, okay? What about the weirdest thing you can think of for the use of a watermelon? Hat, yeah, curve it out and stick it on your head. Okay, so really thinking along a different pathway. I was listening to the news the other day, and there was a doctor on an aeroplane, and somebody stopped breathing, and he had to do a tracheotomy. And he used the cap of an Evian bottle and a biro and several other things as makeshift equipment that he could use. Okay, so being able to think on the spot, think differently, and different uses for products. Okay, being able to think outside the box. Okay, so Mr. X has been told a number of times to be in the office at 9 a.m, but he's always late. Why is he always late? Anybody think of a story? His clock is upside down. Okay? All sorts of different things. Mrs. Q has a number of clothes, but she's been wearing the same dress for the last 2 weeks. Why has she been wearing a dress for the last 2 weeks? She loves that dress very much. Anything else? There's a few people. She's wearing a uniform.
Her boyfriend loves
You're very quiet over here. Anything you want to say? Okay. Okay, so lateral thinking, coming up with very different ideas. Okay? Very different ideas. So there's lots of different fluency on the verbal side of things. You can come up with words containing a particular given letter or the start of a letter or synonyms. Fluency of 4-word sentences. Last class I made them write a tweet, but that tweet had to be a story, a full story. And what is a tweet? 150 odd characters. Okay, so there's lots of different ways you can get people to think differently and to see things differently and to change things around. Now, you've actually done this in our first lecture or second lecture that we did, using visual writing picture tests, figural tests, making objects, okay, drawing and seeing how you think in a sort of a more visual aspect. So if you remember right back at the beginning, I got you to do, actually Hannah was brilliant, you did an umbrella, didn't you? Do you remember? With different shapes, okay? And this is a very well-known test for identifying gifted and talented thinking. So if we look at this first one here, okay, you've got a semicircle, you've got a rectangle, a 90-degree angle, you've got a wiggly line and 3 dashes. So you get given a plain piece of paper with just these marks on it. And this is what some of them come up with. Okay? So you've got the semicircle here, the wiggly line, the 3 dashes, and the angle over there. Again, the angle, dotted lines, a lovely animal that they've drawn, and the sunshine. A house. And then you can mark them, and depending on how they've used the particular lines, they'll get a different mark. So that got 21. This purple one here got 38. And then this one that was, it was very sort of individual ideas, only got 19. Okay, so you can mark the creativity of that particular individual and what they are coming up and their ideas that they are thinking about. Now, creativity tests have been found to be reliable. So if you test them at time 1, they would be as creative if you test them at time 2. But the validity of these tests have been questioned over the years with regard to sort of the ability to predict the creative potential in individuals. Now this is another test, and it's called the remote association test, that has been used to consider the use of how people can connect and combine ideas. Okay, so in your groups, I want you to think about how you can connect and combine these words to come up with one word that associates them all together. So square, cardboard and open would be box. Yeah. Okay, so what connects broken, clear and eye, coin, quick and spoon, time, hair and stretch. Now they're the easier ones, apparently, and these two are slightly harder. So in your groups, have a little brainstorm and see if you can come up with the ideas that link these two together. How can you connect? Okay, shall I give you the answers? Okay, so this is all about connecting and combining ideas that gifted and talented children get really easily. Okay, so silver spoon, silver quick, or quicksilver and silver coin. Long time, long hair, long stretch. And soap opera. Yeah, hand soap, dish soap. Okay, homesick, seasick, sick beds. Okay, so it's easy when you've got the answers. Yeah? But those of us who are gifted and talented are able to connect and to combine these. Okay, is everyone back? Nearly. Okay, let's go anyway, because otherwise we'll be here till midnight. Okay, this is Harvard Business Review on how you all think. Identifying your thinking slides.
Butt heads with a certain coworker, or find that you're constantly having to repeat yourself with your boss. The issue could be different thinking styles. Consultant Mark Bonchak and CEO Elisa Steele suggest analyzing how you think according to 2 dimensions. First, focus refers to the factors that you tend to pay most attention to: ideas, process, action, or relationships. Next, orientation refers to the scale at which you approach a situation. Do you like lots of details or the big picture? By combining these 2 dimensions, you can begin to see the thinking styles that affect the way you work. Explorers are all about generating creative ideas, while experts are about achieving objectivity and insight. Planners design effective systems, while optimizers focus on productivity and efficiency. Energizers like to mobilize people into action, while producers prefer to achieve completion and momentum themselves. Connectors think about building and strengthening relationships and networks, while coaches prefer to work one-on-one and cultivate individual potential. Once you understand what style feels more natural to you, it will get easier to see people's strengths and weaknesses, including your own. By mapping your team's thinking styles, you can also see where communication breaks down and how team members complement each other.
Okay, so understanding your thinking style can also help understand how you understand others and how you can get people to work better as a team. So what I'm going to ask you to do is a very quick, a very rudimentary thinking style questionnaire. So if you can use the QR code here, it'll take you to a very simple, very unscientific, but a little bit of fun thinking styles, okay? And all you need to do is, once you on the QR code, just scroll down and the questions start as you scroll down. Okay, whilst you're still filling in, we'll talk about some myths about creative thinking and problem solving.
You're already too excited to see the results.
Right, everyone finished? Okay. Right, myths about creative problem solving. The first one is that every problem has only one solution. Every problem does not have just one solution. If you discover a solution that works, it's a good solution, but there may be other solutions by other people, okay? Doesn't mean to say your solution is wrong, it just means to say there are others out there, okay? Putting words on paper, fountain pen, ballpoint pen, pencil, marker, typewriter, Xerox machine, printing. Lots of different ways of doing it, not necessarily one is better than the other. But what about the future? Are we going to have voice recognition? We already do actually, don't we? You can double click your function button and you speak into your computer. And thought wave input, who knows in the future? You could just think to Siri and Siri will do what we want him to do. It's very scary. When I was a kid, it was all about touch typing, and now I tell my kids you don't even need to bother to learn to touch type because you just talk. I mean, how these things are going forward. It's so quick and it's so scary. Okay, the second myth, the best answer solution method has already been found. Of course it hasn't. Okay, there's always improvement. The ox and horse, the car, the wagon, the train, the car, the aeroplane, the jet. What are we going to be travelling in the future? Okay, hovercraft, Star Trek type beams, our own personal cars that like aeroplanes. Who knows what's going to happen? But it is those thinkers that are going to make it happen. And actually, the third myth is that we have to be very complex in the way in which we think about it. And when you think about your A, B, C, and D, okay, it doesn't have to be complex, an idea, to actually come up with a really good solution in the first place. Now, this is a lovely story about when hot dogs were first invented over in the United States. They were served in gloves because they were too hot, obviously, to hold them, but people kept walking off with the gloves, and of course this got really expensive. So the solution was not complex. They served them in buns instead, so it didn't burn your fingers, and people didn't disappear off with the gloves. So the thinking is not about how you can change the glove situation, but what you can do to change the problem in the first place, okay? They stopped thinking about the gloves altogether and they started thinking in a totally different way. So combining those ideas, thinking outside the box, it doesn't have to be complicated at all. Okay, the last exercise. Now, some of you will have seen this before, some of you won't, okay? So what I want you to do is draw the box of the 9 box digit, okay? And you need to connect the dots. But only 4 9s are required to connect the dots. So position your pencil on one of the dots and don't allow your pencil to come off the paper. Okay, don't let your pen come. 1. Okay, so this is actually off the paper. Yeah. There is another way of doing it as well. Did I write that one down? No, I didn't. Okay, so thinking outside the box. This is where this came from. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4. This point and that point are actually off the paper. There is a way of doing it that you were trying to do. It was so close and I can't remember how it was, but it's very similar. Okay. So society plays a real role in developing and advancing our creativity. And we're going to come on and talk a lot more about education next week in developing children's creativity within education and learning. And we're going to talk about creative teaching or teaching for creativity. What is the difference between the two of them? So education really does play a fundamental role in shaping the creative environment. The more, as you've seen today, you're exposed to it, the more you start thinking in different ways and being able to connect those ideas together. art and culture have a real way of stimulating people's imagination, and the more we're exposed to it, the more we absorb it. And creativity in schools and in colleges and universities has really been developed over the past few years. And even last year and the year before, we've been teaching a whole creativity course within one of the undergraduate BAPI courses. It's about fostering this flexibility, and we'll talk next week about the characteristics, personality of openness to new experiences as being a personality trait that you see in these children who are creative, gifted and talented. They adapt to new situations, they see things and do things in sort of different and unexpected ways. So imagination, divergent thinking and intuition need to be considered really important parts of our education system to get individuals to think divergently and to use that impulse of that convergent and divergent thinking and being able to see it and use it together. So while knowledge of the future world works and is great for all students, we really need to consider those who are gifted and talented and creative, because they are going to be the next generation of amazing thinkers that come up with the new ways of our antibiotics, so we're not, reliant on the mutations that have happened within our bodies and they're not working the medicines as they should do and used to do. So it's all about this role of the next generation for those careers and jobs we just don't know exist yet. And to do this, we need to get these children to build on other people's ideas, okay? To work as teams. We need them to look at the competitors and not just copy what they've done, but come up with new ways of doing it. I mean, the iPad is an amazing invention, okay? We all use it and take it for granted now. It's a new form of paper. What are we going to have next? It's not about copying those ideas, it's about creating new ideas. And when we're talking about brainstorming and coming up with weird and wacky ideas, I mean, who sat in that meeting and went, do you know what, let's build a whole load of islands that represent the world off the coast of Dubai and let's make them all man-made? I mean, who sat in that meeting and went, yes, brilliant idea, let's do it? Okay, it's about coming up with those weird and wacky ideas and go, yes, let's do that. Okay, the generation of thinking differently and seeing things in a totally different way. Creativity is about challenging the assumptions. Why do watermelons have to be round? Why can't they be square? Changing the way in which things have always been done. There's no reason why things have to be the same way. And it's welcoming those unusual ideas. Yeah? Why can't we do things differently and see things in a different way? And as I said, it's about forgetting the rules, going out of the circle, thinking outside the box, okay? Going beyond the restrictions of society and thinking differently. Wikipedia. I mean, everybody uses Wikipedia. It hasn't been around long, but what an invention. What a way of thinking. Totally free, made by volunteers. I mean, what a wonderful thing to have come up with. Yeah? And this is our future. Thinking of things that do not exist. Everyone has this creative ability, but we need to lose that fear of being wrong. We need to lose that fear of having weird and wonderful ideas. Because actually, do you know what? They can be implemented and they can be real. So we really need to think about how we can get creativity into our curriculums. And we're going to talk about some research within Singapore and Hong Kong that have already been done. And there's a real rationale for making it an essential part of the curriculum, and being this third R, the reading, writing, arithmetic, and sort of creativity, to get people to see things, to observe things, to think abstractly, laterally, okay, divergently, and really understand and get a grip with the problems of the future, the pollution that is going on at the moment, world poverty, hunger. Individuals in our classrooms are going to be the ones that solve this, and we have to give them those skills in order for them to do it. So it's got to be part of the curriculum. Okay, we're going to watch the end.